Dark black and white. Dark black and dark black and
We're now going to begin the Committee of Education Administration. We have a full calendar for the next 2 hours, so we'll go ahead and get started. Before we do so, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Representatives Baum, Bulso,
Here.
Butler, Fritz, Gant, Gillespie, Haston, Hurt, Jones, Lafferty, Love, McKenzie, Parkinson, Reagan, Ritchie,
Here.
Stevens, Warner, Vice Chairman Slater, Chairman White.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Members, welcome everyone to the committee today. I'll give some instructions here in a moment. Before we do so, I'm going to ask Chair Lady Moody to, we always open our committee with a prayer because we need guidance as we instruct, come up with the wisdom to help our children in the state of Tennessee. Chair Lady Moody.
Thank you, Chairman, and anyone that would like to join us, if you'll bow your heads. Father, we ask you and thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for this room full of people that are so concerned, Lord, for our children, our educators, our state, and we thank you for each one that is here. We ask you to guide us as we make decisions, and Lord, as we seek to make Tennessee number one in the country in the education efforts of our students. And Lord, we ask you to protect our schools and our students and educators and families. And Father, we just thank you and look forward to all we're going to hear today. And we ask you again to help us in our work, whatever that is, Lord. And thank you again. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Members, quickly, does anybody have an announcement or a recognition we jump into before we get into our session? Okay. Yes, sir. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to welcome Dr. Barker here from the great Lenoir City School System. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you very much. We do have a lot of special guests. Nashville Propel, raise your hand. We have them out here, a great organization. Thank you all so much for also being here. Members, as we begin, let me make a couple of remarks. We're at a very fortunate time in our state that we have such focus on education, as you all know. And it's been, I have sat on this committee as a sub-chair or full chair for the last 9 years. And I'm at the point where I want us to really get it right. You know, we all know where we are, the challenges in our third grade reading. We can debate that all day long. But a few remarks are, we are not here today to discuss legislation or any position on the current issue before us, which is third grade retention. The very fact that we are having to discuss whether or not our schools hold back an 8-year-old or third grader shows that we have already failed too many children. And it's time for us to get it right. In 2011, the Tennessee General Assembly was focusing on the same issue. It was reported in the Knox News on June 13th of 2011, and I quote, "Starting next school year, Tennessee third graders will no longer be allowed to move to the next grade unless they can demonstrate understanding of the curriculum and basic reading skills." That was 12 years ago. So here we are 12 years later, still having the same discussion. We are told that if the current law stays in place, that law being the one we passed in January 2021, it will cause our school systems to hold too many back in the third grade. But yet for the past 12 years, we did have a retention law with no change. And a first grader in 2011, by the way, just graduated from high school this past summer. So today I want to change our discussion moving forward. We, this committee, we are not here to talk about retaining an 8-year-old. Well, we're here, any piece of legislation you may have or that you may have heard of, committee members, on this topic, remove it from your thinking during this 2 hours. You are here to learn. We have a committee of 19 or 20. 9 of us did not serve on this committee last year and don't have past experiences to what we have done. So I want you to listen and learn today. I want to challenge each of you and myself to ask, what are we not doing in the first years of a student's education, kindergarten, first and second grade, and third, that allows so many to test below or approaching proficiency on our state and, of course, tests in the third grade? We could all debate the point that basing the retention on one test may not be good, but that is not the point we need to make. We have a great opportunity in 2023 in this committee to finally get it right. I personally am grateful that in 2021, January, we came back in a special session, that we passed the retention law, because now we have everybody's attention. So I challenge the 147 districts across our state. What are you doing to prepare your students to perform well in reading literacy? And I know it's hard, but that's our job. And may I add, so we don't put all the burden on teachers, before teachers, it's the job of a parent. And if you are a parent and you're not working with your children daily, then you're missing the boat. So yesterday we had Coach Tony Dungy, former coach. He came to Tennessee, and he has a fatherhood initiative, and we as a state are going to partner with him across the state to talk about how important it is for us to have strong homes with fathers in them, so that our children are not left out to grow up on their own. So today we have invited guest speakers to talk about early childhood literacy. We want to think about finding solutions to K-1 and 2 so that third grade retention is not a subject to discuss. So committee members, I'm going to have to run it real tight because we've got a lot of members, guests here. So we have 6 different sections on our agenda today, 2 of which will be addressed in a panel-like setting. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to present, except one will have an out-of-state speaker that I'm giving 10 minutes. Then we will go on to 5 to 8 minutes of questions from the members. I will make sure that each member is heard during the hearing, which means that some members may not be called on until everyone has a question. So what I'm going to do, probably recognize no more than 3 people after each speaker, and then move on to the speaker. So write your questions down, and we will address those in the coming weeks. With that in mind, I'd like to invite up our Commissioner Swin to come up. Now, you will give us a short presentation. There will be no questions after her comments, because I'm going to bring her back up at the end where you can ask questions, and then let her to respond to some of the things that were heard during this time. And Commissioner Swin is going to update us on where we are, committee. Commissioner Swin, you are recognized.
Thank you, sir. Nice to see everyone. Penny Schwinn, Commissioner of Education, great state of Tennessee. I will keep within my time because I know there's lots of folks with a lot to say, but wanted to give a little bit of an overview of where we are and where we have been in terms of performance and initiatives here in the state of Tennessee. So moving forward in terms of 2021, there was a special session. 2 really important pieces of legislation passed during that. They are connected even though they were separate. The first was the Tennessee Literacy Success Act, and the second was the Tennessee Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act. Some highlights of both of these pieces of legislation that are connected to the conversation today include all LEAs are now required, and public charter schools, to include foundational skills or phonics-based instruction and high-quality instructional materials for K through 3rd grade students for English language arts. That is in addition to professional development that is now required for all educators who are teaching children how to read. The second was the use of a universal screener. So now statewide, it is required that all students in those early grades have a universal screener 3 times per year to benchmark and manage against how students are learning to read, how well, and that the information from those screeners is provided to families on a regular basis. Third is that districts are required to provide reading supports and interventions to students who are not on grade level, especially after giving those universal screeners, and to provide notification to parents, again, multiple times per year about the reading progression of their children. That starts in kindergarten and continues through that 3rd grade space. It creates long-term summer programming. We've had tremendous success in the state with our summer programming, the largest program in the country proportionally, and that is for rising 1st graders through rising 8th graders. There is, of course, legislation proposed this year to have that expand to rising kinder through rising 9th. Tremendous participation. Our districts have done a phenomenal job in that work. And then the last piece of these 2 pieces of legislation is the small group tutoring, or Tennessee All-Core. It does establish a permanent tutoring core for students. That is a 3-to-1 ratio, 2 to 3 times per week, 1 content level for each semester. Again, most of our districts are focusing in that literacy and math, but specifically for this conversation today, the literacy tutoring. Moving forward in terms of what we've done and some of the investments that we've made as a state in early literacy, over $400 million will be invested in early literacy over a 4-year time period. That money is going predominantly to the early literacy work, such as Reading 360 and the initiatives there. Tennessee All Core, so the tutoring initiative, 150,000 K through 8 students in the first 3 years. Summer programming for those students, family notifications and additional family supports, and then a website that is a one-stop shop for videos, many of which have been done by our Tennessee teachers, resources for families, etc. Getting a little bit to some of the interventions and supports that we've provided as a state, and these are predominantly things that our districts have done, again, during a pandemic in a very short period of time. They have gotten stood up and are doing exceptionally well in terms of implementation. Training and coaching of over 30,000 teachers in the state with a 97% satisfaction rate. We have over 100 districts and 250 district leaders who have participated in implementation networks focused on early literacy and high quality materials. Online tools, additional tutoring for over 13,000 students using micro grants for families. Our ed preps have done an incredible job of building innovative courses so that we are now teaching our teachers how to teach reading significantly better than we ever have before. And then a public awareness campaign. Over 200,000 families have opted into different types of resources, whether those are decodables or early readers sent home, text messages that come and help you understand or think about how you can help your child with reading at home, or certainly over 600,000 books and backpacks that are sent home for students to build at-home libraries. But one of the things that we're hearing the most about in terms of implementation is certainly the pathway to 4th grade and that promotion. So what I want to do is just take one more minute and walk through the actual options that are presented in the legislation that was passed in 2021. So if you are a 3rd grader and you take the TCAP, English Language Arts, that year, you are eligible for promotion under the following situations. There are about 8 or 9 of them. So if you are a student who has had 2 or fewer years and you're an English learner, you are exempt from this. If you are a student who has been previously retained in K through 3, you are exempt. If you are a student that has a disability that impacts your ability to learn to read, you are exempt. If you are a student who has a suspected disability that could impact your ability to learn to read, you are exempt. Those 4 groups of students do not apply in this case. If you take the TCAP and you have an approaching or a below score, the following avenues are available to be promoted to the next grade. You can retake the assessment, and if you are successful, you're promoted to the 4th grade. If you go to a summer camp, or if you are at the below level summer camp and tutoring with a 90% attendance rate, you are able to promote to the 4th grade. The department has added additional flexibilities where if those students are unable to have a 90% attendance rate, those days can be made up during the 4th grade year. For Tennessee All Core, there's a lot of flexibility in implementation, including tutoring during the school day, tutoring before school, tutoring after school, or using a third-party provider for tutoring. And then finally, parents have the ultimate decision in terms of an appeal. A parent can file an appeal in 2 different cases. If the student performs at the 40th percentile on a nationally normed benchmark or universal screener, then the parent may file an appeal and that child would be promoted to the 4th grade. Or the parent can file an appeal because there was an event that reasonably impacted the child's performance on the TCAP for that year. Again, the parent is empowered to do that at the end of the school year. We have processes in place where those parents will be informed within 24 to 48 hours in terms of the results of those appeals. And if the appeal for whatever reason is not granted, the child is still able to participate in summer school or in tutoring. So a number of different avenues, 8 or 9 that are going to allow a child to promote to the 4th grade. But in closing, in my last kind of final seconds, just want to reiterate the importance of 3rd grade reading. I've got, as many of you know, an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old at home, and they are very little girls. And so it's hard to think that something that's happening when they're so young is going to impact them for the rest of their lives. But in our data in Tennessee, what we see right now is that since 2010, if a student is not proficient in 3rd grade English language arts, they had less than a 10% likelihood of being proficient in 8th grade. We've seen that as 3rd graders, 56% were not proficient in English language arts in 2014. But by the time they reached 8th grade, testing in spring of 2019, only 8% of those students had reached proficiency. As I said, our districts are doing a phenomenal job in implementing the laws that you all passed in 2021. I strongly encourage that we continue to fund and support those interventions and acceleration opportunities for students. They are making a difference. And one of the things that we can continue to do is keep a strong focus on early reading. It is one of the most important things that we do in public education. Appreciate the time today and the conversation, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. And members, I will bring Commissioner up at the end of the meeting I wanted to lay out exactly where we are in the current legislation. Okay, now I'd like to bring up Dr. Deborah Reed with the University of Tennessee Reading Research Center. Dr. Reed, you are recognized now. Is that, make sure the little red light's on.
There, now it's staying on. Thank you, Chairman White. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm Deborah Reed. I'm a professor at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and I direct the Tennessee Reading Research Center, a Reading 360 initiative. The center was formed to be in partnership with the Tennessee Department of Education. However, it's designed to be an independent evaluation arm for the purposes of examining the outcomes of certain aspects of the Reading 360 initiative. So we have a series of evaluations planned to help inform the rollout of this very comprehensive initiative. And I will say, I just arrived in Tennessee over the summer. I have worked in other states such as Texas and Florida. I have never seen such a large-scale, comprehensive literacy initiative being rolled out all at one time. So it's incredibly impressive. And I believe that anything of this scale is probably going to take some time to really get fully implemented and to see the impacts of it. I was asked today to comment on the historical performance of Tennessee's children on the National Assessment of Educational Progress Reading Assessment. I've provided a handout for you that I believe you have electronically that contains more information that I'm probably going to be able to talk about today. But I will draw your attention to a couple of things. First of all, the national part of the NAEP, or National Assessment of Educational Progress, is exactly what the name suggests. It is administered in all 50 states, as well as in the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the Department of Defense schools. So it is a way that we have to compare state to state how students are doing that we cannot do with a single state's test, because every state has a different test. So we're not comparing apples to oranges if we look only at state tests. So the NAEP provides us that opportunity to get a feel for where Tennessee is relative to other states. So I've just plotted a few states for you, and the NAEP has different proficiency categories, similar to how TCAP has proficiency categories. On NAEP, they're below basic, proficient, and advanced. And of course, the goal is proficient and advanced, which means that students can not only read the words on the page, understand the basic facts of the words on the page, but also have inference capability with that material, meaning that they can connect information across the passage, such as a cause that's in one part of the passage, but the effect is later in the passage. They would understand the relationship between those ideas. They would be able to evaluate material. They could discern tone, those sorts of things that we expect of students as they're reading complex material on grade level in their courses, such as English language arts, but also science and social studies. So it's an indicator of how they can use reading to really perform a lot of learning that they do in other classes, and not just of their reading ability solely, but reading that is in service of other activities. What I want to point out in the first graph that you see on the front page of showing the performance from 1998 to 2022 is that there was a large jump in Tennessee's scores, which serendipitously is the orange line, between 2011 and 2013. And so after those results came out in 2014, Tennessee was noted as being this rising star with the most or the largest leaps in performance during that time. And that predates my time in Tennessee. So I've asked what people attributed that to, and they talked about the focus on instruction in the classroom. The standards changed during that period. The teacher evaluation system changed during that period and provided more feedback. The test became aligned to the standards. And so I'm pointing that out because I think there are a lot of parallels with what occurred during that time period and what you see in Reading 360. There's an intense focus on instruction, delivering high quality instruction in the classroom using high quality materials. So although nationally we saw a dip in performance that many associate with a lack of proper instruction during the pandemic when education was disrupted, the fact that Reading 360 is being rolled out at this time period, if it is in parallel to what occurred in 2011 and 2013, we might expect that there would be a bump in performance. So I think those are promising avenues. Again, I think that there are many good things that are happening related to the initiative that put that strong focus on instruction and on what's happening for kids in classrooms across the grade levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right at 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Would you explain to the committee exactly, make sure everyone knows what Reading 360 is?
Yes, I think it is the part of the legislation and the response to the legislation. So there are a series of things that are provided as supports. Some are directed at community organizations, and I know you're going to hear from the Governor's Early Literacy Foundation. Some are directed at schools, so things related to the universal reading screeners, the high quality instructional materials, the early reading training that's being provided to educators. And this is the really unique part, I think, to Reading 360 that is not happening in other states. Some of those efforts are directed at educator preparation programs. That is an area that most states say they will not touch with a 10-foot pole, but Tennessee has grasped that and is moving forward with that. So there are things that are happening and changes that are being instituted in the way that we prepare our future literacy educators as well, all part of Reading 360.
Thank you. Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Reed, thank you for being here and thank you for the information and the presentation. And I think you touched on this a little bit, but I want to ask more specifically two questions, I guess. Should we pay more attention to that third grade TCAP or the fourth grade NAEP? And touch again on the exact difference between those two for us.
Yeah, so third grade tends to be the indicator that we look at for how students will perform in the future because it is supposed to be the culmination of the intense efforts on learning to read. And from fourth grade on, we tend to focus more on using reading to learn. So that's the emphasis I was drawing with NAEP, with the kinds of texts and the expectations for reading performance on NAEP being related to how students can use reading in service of learning other content and in other places. So third grade tells us if they're on target to make that shift or not, from learning to read to reading to learn.
Yes. Anyone else? I'll entertain another question of Dr. Reed. Seeing none. Thank you so very, very much. If you would also stay with us just in case we end up early, we have other questions as we go through. Thank you very much. I'd now like to bring up Jack Powers. Would you like to come on up? And Dr. Kimyana Burke. And also bring up James Pond with the Governor's Early Literacy Foundation. You can sit over here on the other table. And Ms. Dishner, if there's room, you can also come up and sit so that we can move from one to the other. Talking about why third grade reading proficiency is important. I'm going to start with Jack. Would you like to start out? If y'all will, each speaker, if you'll identify yourself and give us a little background on your credentials, that would help the audience as well as the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. So my name is Jack Powers. I'm the Regional Advocacy Director for Excel in Ed. And really what I just wanted to come up here today and do is kind of offer a personal anecdote from my own time as a teacher. I know that you all are going to hear from a lot of experts nationally as well as at the state level today. And I began my career in education actually teaching high school English to 11th and 12th graders. So as far away as you can get from third grade and still be in the K-12 system. But I saw the importance of teaching early literacy the right way firsthand in Mississippi, where I began my career, and in Tennessee, where I also taught public school. You know, I taught every 11th and 12th grade English class that there was. I taught AP English, I taught regular English, I taught Cambridge English, and I even taught English to kind of struggling learners. And in Coahoma County, Mississippi, where I taught in a town of 17,000 people, I could tell which elementary school my students had attended by their literacy level. I had students who could read a paragraph out loud perfectly, and they couldn't answer a multiple choice question about what they had just read. So I could tell which elementary schools were teaching based on the science of reading, based on phonics, and which ones were not. And so that is what I want to kind of stress to committee members before you all continue to hear from these national experts, that this matters not just, to your point, Chairman, for third grade, but in the earlier grades, but also downstream. If a student cannot read by the time that they leave third grade, they're not set up to be successful in any subjects or grades following. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kenyatta, if you would identify yourself and your full name.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kimyana Burke. I am the Senior Policy Fellow for Early Literacy at the Foundation for Excellence in Education. I'm also the former State Literacy Director for the Mississippi Department of Education, where I, under Dr. Wright's leadership, led the implementation of Mississippi's Literacy-Based Promotion Act from 2013 until 2019. I'd like to just begin by setting the stage around why reading by third grade matters. One thing that we have to remember is that children who are struggling readers become adults who are struggling readers, and this impacts every aspect of their daily lives, from children being able to read and understand assignments to adults being able to help their child with homework, right? As elementary students, they may have difficulty, so not just education, they may have difficulty reading or writing a birthday card. As an adolescent, being able to fill out a job application or an application to be able to take the driver's license test to receive their license. And as adults, being able to complete applications for housing and also for job applications. So when we talk about the science of reading and we talk about the types of instruction that should be happening in classrooms, teachers should be using, which is outlined in Tennessee's Early Literacy Success Act and other laws across the country that are grounded in the science of reading. Teachers should use those evidence-based practices in the components of reading, including the phonemic awareness, where children are able to hear the sounds, phonics, matching sounds to letters, the vocabulary, being able to understand the vocabulary and the words that you're reading, and also through language comprehension, understanding what you're hearing, but then also your fluency and comprehension. So all of the things that go into building a skilled reader and teaching a child how to read. So based on the model by Nancy Young called The Ladder of Reading, as an educator, and I'm a former elementary, middle, and high school teacher, as an educator in a typical classroom, this is why we say teachers are superheroes, right? About 5% to 10% of those students who enter classrooms are going to come to school with skills that are the primary basis for being able to become a skilled reader. They will have some foundational skills that they enter those doors with. About 30% of the students in the classroom, learning to read may be relatively easy for them with broad instruction. But about 60% of the students who enter the classroom, maybe 5 to 10% of those students are dyslexic. These students will need this type of structured literacy instruction that's grounded in the science of reading in order to learn to crack the code of how to be able to read. So one thing that we do know as well, if you listen to all the data, and also look more deeply, and I always say look under the hood when it comes to subgroup data, is that reading struggles do not discriminate. It doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your income. Reading struggles do not discriminate. And there has to be a comprehensive approach to improving reading outcomes to ensure that all children, all educators, and all parents and families get the support that they need in order to ensure that, especially for Tennesseans, that students are having a better quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, anybody have a question for Ms. Burke at this time? Okay, let's go on to Mr. James Pond, the Governor's Early Literacy Foundation. Sir, you're recognized.
Good afternoon, Chairman White, members of the committee. Thank you so much for having us. James Pond, I'm the president of Governor's Early Literacy Foundation. I think one of the resounding messages that all of you are hearing this afternoon is that if we don't get reading right, nothing else matters. So our foundation's primary mission is to strengthen early literacy in Tennessee. We've been an entity here in Tennessee since 2004. We manage Dolly Parton's Imagination Library for the state of Tennessee, serving about 290,000 children from birth to 5. We also carry a legacy of first here in Tennessee. So we were the first ones to do a kindergarten to third grade home library program in which we are serving about 270,000 kindergarten to third grade students with summer reading book packets that are high quality books and resources that go out to families. We're doing a caregiver engagement program serving almost 250,000 families across the state. As well, we're really trying to create a culture of reading by supporting book buses, which are mobile libraries across the state, state storybook trails in which there's a outdoor reading experience for families. And we're supporting an initiative called the Statewide Early Literacy Education Collaborative of Tennessee, which is bringing together all of our nonprofit partners, school districts, and other early literacy entities in a statewide collaborative so that we can all be rowing in the same direction together, which I think is the resounding cry of all of the folks here that are here today. RY is really centered around the idea that third grade reading is not only a benchmark for academic success, but it leads to other outcomes. We know that if a child is not reading by third grade, they're going to struggle with their eighth grade math and reading. They're less likely to graduate from high school. They're less likely to go to college. They're less likely to have a successful career. And here in Tennessee, as we're seeing enormous investment of corporations coming in, we do not have a prepared and ready workforce if our children are not reading proficiently. So the cost is really high. As well, we see an increase in incarceration rates. I know there's an oft-quoted myth that prison beds are slated on third grade reading scores. While that is not true, what is true is that 70% of incarcerated people do not read at a fourth grade level. That has enormous implications for us as a society and as a state. So I think what's at risk by not getting reading right is tremendously important for us to be looking at and supporting. For us, the Literacy Success Act and the Reading 360 have been tremendous initiatives. We look at ways that we can scaffold in supports for all of our state partners to make sure that what we do as a state is all of us rowing together in the same direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pond. One thing I always hear is that in our lower income homes or in homes in poverty, there's not enough books in the home. Reemphasize one more time the scope of the Governor's Literacy Council and getting those books in as many homes as we can.
Yeah, so our effort, these programs are available to all children everywhere. There is no distinguishing between who can receive these programs. So our Birth to Five program, which is Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, serves about 290,000 children in all 95 counties. That's serving about 70% of the state's population in that category. And then in our kindergarten to third grade program, we've continued to build that up. This year, we'll be serving 270,000 kindergarten through third grade students.
Thank you very much. Any member have a question of Mr. Pond? Thank you. Let's go to Miss Nancy Dishner, the Niswonger Foundation. I spent a lot of time up in East Tennessee with the Niswonger Foundation and the great group they bring all their principals together, or excuse me, their superintendents together in that area. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It is an incredible honor to be with you today. And I thought about how I might be able to share about my experiences in a quick manner. And I would just say that I pretty much grew up in an elementary classroom. I remember that my childcare was really in my mother's classroom. So that was where I spent a lot of time until I was 6 years old and started to school myself in the same school where my father was principal. So needless to say, education was encouraged in my home. And from that experience, I've had a 45-year career in education, serving public education in the state of Tennessee and caring about the children and the future of our students. So it's a great pleasure to come to you and talk about a little bit of the work of the Niswonger Foundation, which, if you don't know our work, in the past year, just completing our annual report, we served 222,000 students across our state with programs, activities, materials, and opportunities, and over 17,000 educators across the state with all types of materials and training and professional development. And we're very proud of that work. But when I think about what we've learned most from that work, it's what I get to see as I talk to families. And as we have an opportunity with our programs to see families struggling. And while we serve all students, we are really very focused on helping the students that are the least of these, the one that are least likely to have what they will need to move forward unless we help them with programs and activities. And that's where we focus our attention. But let me start first with an Aaron story. Aaron is my oldest child, and I read to him while he was in the womb. And I read to him every day after he was born. I wanted him to hear the spoken word, and I wanted him to understand the cadence of the human voice, because I wanted him to become an educated person. As soon as he was sitting up, he had a book in his lap, and I was teaching him to gently turn the pages and talking to him about the illustrations and helping him to understand the power of words. My child went through first grade and second grade with remarkable teachers, but he was a non-reader when he got to the second grade classroom. Second grade classroom, his teacher was me. He had mom for his second grade because we were in a small rural school in Unicoi County, and that was the opportunity he had. So maybe not the best teacher, but certainly one who was committed to helping him to be successful. And I worked with him 24/7 with every possible means of exciting thing I could to help him to develop his skill in reading. But he went on to the third grade as a poor reader. In third grade, he had the most remarkable teacher I've ever known, and I believe one of the most remarkable teachers our state has ever seen. It was my mother. And in that year's time, she did exactly what I did, only she did it with her intensely better capability. And she worked with that child until he went on to fourth grade as a modest reader, not a great reader, but he was able to read. And it was fifth grade before my son was ever a really successful reader. And now he's an avid reader as an adult. But I tell you that story because it's not a respecter of persons or families. We can come from the best opportunities, two well-trained teachers who struggled to help that child to learn to read. So just because you come from a great situation does not mean that it's going to be easy for your journey. But I'll share also another story from just the last couple of weeks, as we are very proud partners with the Tennessee Department of Education, with Tennessee All-Core. And we at the Niswonger Foundation are currently tutoring over 2,800 students. But one of those students was being picked up by his mom, and our director of the program happened to be there with the tutor that day, and they were handing out a backpack of supplies and materials that the mom could take home with her to help her child who was struggling with reading. And as they were going through the materials and helping her to understand how to utilize those in the home, she began to weep. And she said, "I've always wanted to help my child, but I had no idea where to start." I just gave you two very distinct examples: ability and inability, and desire and passion to try to help children. So what are we doing right? Commissioner Swin just pointed out a magnitude of things that I completely support and believe are the right direction. With our high quality materials, our teacher professional development, what we're doing with our colleges of education to ensure that our pre-professional teachers are prepared to use those high quality materials, and all kinds of safety nets like the tutoring and our summer programming. We have put a great deal of help in place for students in 3 years that have arguably been the most difficult 3 years in the history of education in our state. So what do we still have to do? And in closing, I would say, one, help us do it with fidelity. Let's watch, support, take care of our superintendents who are doing a magnificent job across the state, and help them to be able to do that job even better. Wherever there's a hole, let's fix it, but let's don't move the target on them. Let's stay the direction, let's stay the course, and let's help them with what has been put in place. And finally, I would say we're not doing it early enough. We have to move back. Birth is when we need to start helping our kids, not when they enter elementary school. So look at Promising Futures and look at it hard, because I believe it is exactly the direction we need to be going. We need to be helping kids in those early years. thank you for this opportunity. It's truly been one of the greatest blessings of my career.
Thank you, and thank you for that advertisement on Promising Futures. That bill will be coming before you, soon. Representative Warner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Dishner, for being here today. Does your foundation support the third grade retention bill?
Microphone?
Very sorry. Sir, we don't support any particular legislation. We support our teachers, we support our school districts, and we help to undergird the work that they're doing.
So it'd be fair to say that your foundation does not support the third grade retention bill. Is that correct?
No, sir, that's not at all what I said. I said that that's not, we don't take a stand on that. What we're doing is we're saying that we're going to support whatever moves forward, and whatever our state decides to do as they move forward, we're going to be there to undergird and support it in every way we possibly can.
Thank you. Would you have any recommendations to any changes to the third grade retention bill?
I greatly appreciate that there are some guardrails that have recently been put in place to help with an opportunity for students to have the chance to do the tutoring and the summer instruction, and a chance for teachers and parents to work on helping them to be more successful by the time they reach fourth grade. I'm very grateful for that, but no additional at this time.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Representative Gillespie, you have a comment? You're okay? Great.
I'll say something. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all so much for being here. Something you just said that really kind of, if you could elaborate, please, about starting from birth. I was just curious because I definitely agree, but I'm not an educator and I don't know what I'm talking about in that regard from a practical standpoint like you do. Are there other states, are there other examples, are there foundations that provide some of these, let's not say birth, but let's say, a year old or whatever you want to set that number to? Can you kind of elaborate that? And if it goes to someone else, I'm okay with that as well.
Right, and I'm very happy for anyone else to step up to address as well. But I would say that there are many best practices. And among those best practices are some like we see with the Governor's Early Literacy Foundation. We need print-rich homes. We need an opportunity for kids to see books around their home, and hopefully parents reading, because that's a very fine example. Great practice. We also know that there needs to be quality childcare opportunities. And those childcare opportunities are one about helping the child to be able to have good early educational experiences. But those good childcare opportunities are also helping to give the parents a chance to be back in the workforce and helping to support their family. An excellent practice for that as well. And of course, preschools are very important in my opinion. And they help the child to be prepared to communicate well with other children, to develop the social skills that are needed so that when they enter kindergarten, and I've taught kindergarten, when they enter kindergarten, that they are prepared on day one to move forward.
Thank you very much. And thank you all very much for your time, Oh, do you have a question, sir? I'm sorry, didn't have you on the list. You're recognized, Representative Parkinson.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we're going to act right today now. Look, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say to Kim Yada, I had a chance to hear you speak at Excel in Education. Was that late last year? Yeah. And I just want to tell you, thank you for all the work that you're doing. Truly appreciate it. Had a chance to meet you on stage, but you were busy. So yeah, but thanks for being here. I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Members, let's now bring up, thank you all very much. Dr. Carrie Wright, the former Commissioner of Education in the state of Mississippi. I've gotten to know Dr. Wright over the years. We both sat on the NAEP board together, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. As a matter of fact, we have a meeting at the end of next week. This is the nation's report card that is a standard for the nation. And Mississippi started this about 8 years ago, I believe. And so I asked Dr. Wright to come in and tell us what they did in Mississippi, what has worked or not worked in her presentation. And so, Dr. Wright, you are recognized.
All right, thank you. And thank you for having me, and good afternoon. And I want to say we couldn't be talking about a more important topic than literacy, and so much that you have done and deserve so much credit for. I've read both of your laws, and you are really to be commended for the comprehensive nature in which you approach this topic. So I want to talk briefly about some of the things that we did in Mississippi. I arrived in Mississippi in 2013 as the state superintendent, and 2 laws had just been passed. One was the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, but the other was the Early Learning Collaborative Act, which was the first time that Mississippi had ever put public dollars into pre-K programs. And I say that to going to kind of set the context. This is not a 3rd grade issue. This is a pre-K through grade 3 issue. So it's important what happens in pre-K. It's important what happens in kindergarten. It's important what happens in 1st grade and in 2nd grade, leading to 3rd grade. Because I had to dispel that rumor very quickly in Mississippi because everybody kept referring to it as the 3rd grade law. No, no, no. This is a Literacy-Based Promotion Act, which is a pre-K through grade 3 issue. So when we started this, it really did create the focus on literacy. Mississippi was 50th in the nation, had been for years. And at first they only appropriated $9.5 million. And I went back across the street after the first year and said, if you want us to get closer to proficiency, we're going to need more funds to do it. So they agreed and funded it at $15 million and have funded it at $15 million thereafter. It is a very comprehensive approach to building the capacity of our teachers and our leaders to teach reading, and not just teach reading, but to teach the science of reading, and making sure that we are monitoring student progress as we move along. It does require our 3rd grade students to pass a reading test in order to qualify to pass to 4th grade, unless there is a good cause exemption. There were several key components of this law. First and foremost, we trained all of our teachers in the science of reading, kindergarten through 3rd grade, and now we've even extended that up through grade 8. We were finding, based on information we were getting from our principals and our superintendents, that our teachers were not prepared day 1 to teach reading. So we leaned in very heavily with the letters training. We also hired the coaches, and I think that is a key distinction. We, as the agency, hired the coaches. We did not just simply push the money out and let the districts do that. This was too important for us to make sure that we control for quality and control for people knowing their content. So we hired the coaches, and then we deployed them based on our data to the lowest performing schools. We added a K through 3 monitoring and assessment system, and you've heard about that. It's the same kind of system that you have here 3 times a year. And it also required our schools to engage very early on with our parents. So if a child was struggling in reading in K through 3, a letter had to be sent home at the beginning of the year within the first 30 days telling a parent, this is a child that's struggling in reading, and here are the specific strategies we are going to be using in order to remediate that issue. And then quarterly thereafter, those letters went out to parents. And it also, we didn't even have an office for reading, to be honest with you, or early childhood, to be honest with you, when I got there in November 13. So needless to say, that was something that we had to put in place because we had to support our districts. We have amended that law over the years to add things such as teacher certification, which you already have. Now, all teachers that teach reading in the state of Mississippi must pass a test that is based on the science of reading. We also, in 2016, required all schools to devise individual reading plans for those children that were continuing to struggle in reading. And now we are requiring all schools to provide 4 hours of awareness training around dyslexia and other related disorders, because we knew that there were a lot of children that were struggling where that was concerned as well. However, as the law got implemented, we have a 5-level system. So 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest, 4 is proficient, 5 is advanced. All you had to do when the law was first written was just pass the lowest level. And I thought, we're never going to get there at that rate. So I went back across the street to the legislature and I said, I need you to raise the bar. I need you to raise it to where students have to pass at 3 or higher in order to be promoted to 4th grade. If we're going to get closer to proficiency and we're taking this seriously, then we need to raise the bar and give all the districts 3 years runway. So in 2016, they agreed to it. We had a 3-year runway. And in 2019, I'm going to provide you some data in just a second, students then had to pass at a 3 or higher in order to be promoted to 4th grade, unless there was a good cause exemption. So I think some of the strategies I've already talked about, the fact that we hired the coaches, the coaching strategy has been a very powerful one for us. We not only have coaches in literacy, we have them in early childhood, mathematics, school improvement, special education, data awareness, data analysis, and digital learning. So we have them spread over because all the schools have really enjoyed our coaches, and it has built the capacity of our teachers and leaders across the state. We also then trained, as I said, pre-K through grade 3, but we have extended that up through grade 8, special education, general education, and our administrators. We also invited all of our faculty from our institutions of higher learning. They were allowed to come to the training as well because we wanted them to know what we needed our teachers to know. We also focused on prevention and intervention. So that to me was the key. Get in early. So in kindergarten or pre-K, whenever you've got that first benchmark assessment that teachers then rely on to guide their instruction, start early on, identify those children early on. Our accountability model was one that also leaned very heavily into that. We've got a big part of our accountability model in Mississippi that asks us to look at not only proficiency, but growth of the lowest 25% in English language arts and in mathematics. So immediately eyes are drawn to those children that need them the most. And then we conducted parent meetings. The State Department went out across the state conducting parent meetings to make sure that our parents knew what the law said and knew what the requirements of the law were. We have developed this guide. I'm going to tell Commissioner Schwinn, who happens to be a good friend of mine, and I think you're blessed to have her leading this work. I've said anywhere I talk that anytime that you see something that I put on the screen, please feel free to take our cover off of it, put Tennessee's name on the front of it, and make sure your teachers are getting it, using it, because we have put a lot of time and energy into this, and there's no point in reinventing the wheel. But this is a really good guide for our teachers and our leaders as they are implementing. And you'll see in a slide that I have, our laws are very similar, and we're all aiming toward the very same thing. We asked about parents. Well, we put up a website for our parents. We made sure that this was through from birth to your I'm sorry, he left, from birth through grade 5. And it gives parents ideas in both to be able to do something at home or even if they're on the run. And I think this is a time that we really want to make sure that our parents are getting engaged as early as we possibly can. We develop family success guides from kindergarten through 8th grade in both ELA and mathematics, in both Spanish and in English. So we've tried to make sure that our parents were involved as we went along. I put this slide here because this will show you the before and the after. So the original expectation, this is the final pass rate. In Mississippi, children get an opportunity to pass this assessment 3 times. So the first time is when we give our statewide assessment. Then there is another assessment. Those children that don't pass at that time are given a chance to have intervention. Then another test in May. There other intervention in the summer, and then another test in August. So when they only had to pass at the original over level 1, we really had 93% of our kids doing that by the time the second pass rate was there, but it was only above level 1, which really was not significant. So we went back and raised that, and you can see even with the raising of it before the pandemic and even after the pandemic, we had on the final pass rate 85% of our children passing it on the first time around. Now this does not include any of your good cause exemptions because that's a separate category, but that's huge for us. You mentioned NAEP. Well, here's our NAEP results from 2009 to 2019, and then we added 2020, 22. So you can see that even after the pandemic, Mississippi only dropped by 1%. And I really do attribute that to the foundational processes and initiatives that we have put in place across the state. You can see there's the national average. We are not where we need to be, obviously, but we are so far from where we came. And so that has really, I think the momentum has been building there as well. These are our results for mathematics. And as you know, we did drop, no doubt about it, as did the nation. So math is an area that we are all as a nation going to have to be looking at to see how we work to improve that. We developed this slide. This was one of my favorite slides. You know, when 2019 results came out, Mississippi was ranked #1 in the nation for our gains in 4th grade reading and 4th grade math. We were 3rd in the nation for our gains in 8th grade math and 7th in the nation for our gains in 8th grade reading. And as a summary, this is kind of where we are through quality counts. Quality counts is report that is put out by Education Week. It's put out by Education Week every year. We have come from an F to a C minus, from 50th in the nation to 35th in the nation. Our NAEP ranking has put us at 21, and our graduation rate, as you can see, is 88.9. In fact, Quality Counts ranked Mississippi the second most improved nation in the United States for 3 consecutive years, both before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and after the pandemic. I want to talk a little bit about retention because I know that's on everybody's mind. And you can see the bars that start to the left and end with that yellow bar. That was when the bar was at just passing that level 1. Then we went back in, as I said, in 2016, to raise the bar to 2008 and 2019. And you can see that it did jump. There's no doubt about it. But I wanted to put this in perspective, because this is where we look at kindergarten through 8th grade retention. And you can see that children get retained in kindergarten, in 1st grade, in 2nd grade, et cetera. It's not just in 3rd grade. And even the 3rd grade retention scores, the numbers that you see here, also include those children that local districts have determined to retain, whether it had to do with 3rd grade or not. So those are embedded in that chart as well. This is a chart that I put together to kind of mirror where the 2 laws are. You can see there are so many similarities between Mississippi's law and Tennessee's Literacy Success Act and the Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act. And so we've got the same kind of good cause exemptions that you have in place. And the only major difference that you do see here is around the area of retention. And that is, as I said before, if children are not passing it after the 3rd time around, and they don't have good cause exemption, they are retained. There's a study I want to draw your attention to that just came out from Boston University. It was the Wheelock Educational Policy Center, and they did a study following the first cohort of children under Mississippi's retention law. And they really looked at those that were promoted, those that were retained versus those that were promoted due to good cause exemptions. And I think that's really important to distinguish. And they found that by 6th grade, students that had been retained had substantial and sustained literacy gains in ELA. So much so, more so, quite honestly, than Florida did when Florida put this policy in place. The gains were significant among African American and Hispanic children. And this 3rd bullet, I think, is important because it did not impact attendance, which sometimes people have a tendency to want to talk about, and it did not impact identification for special education. Too often we hear people say, oh, they're struggling in reading, they must be special ed. No, that's not necessarily the case. Not all children that are struggling in reading need special education services. And so this study also shows that there were no additional, there was no uptick in special education identification rates as well. Time that just right. There's my last slide. Thanks for the bell. Yeah.
Thank you so very much. We
You're
have
welcome.
Representative Haston, Chairman Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Wright, thank you for being here. I appreciate when you started off talking about the importance of how things can kind of get, what they can get called and labeled and named early on. And no judgment on anybody here that calls it the 3rd grade retention bill, because I call it the 3rd grade retention bill. But it's, you know, that was one of the problems that we've had from the very beginning, is it's not a 3rd grade retention bill. And from the 400 or 500 emails I got this summer and the hours of meetings I was at in various counties talking about this with parents and teachers and directors, it's not a fail one test equals retention bill either. And so I think that's important to get out there immediately. This was more of a an identification bill. I think it's identification, evaluation, and elevation bill. We've got to properly identify, we've got to properly evaluate the student, and then we have to elevate that student from being, off of grade level to elevate them to on grade level or beyond. But that being said, if everybody still calls it the 3rd grade retention bill, I understand. My question is, it comes to the identification and evaluation part of it. And the levels that you mentioned are really important to me, because that's key in how we're identifying. And so I think that MAP, is that the MAP, the MAP TCAP is what we're talking about, equivalency here. You have 5 levels.
Yes, sir.
And so correct me if I'm wrong, but 3, 4, and 5 are considered passing grade level on that. And so the problem that I think that we might have here that we might need to address is that Tennessee, the TCAP is at 4 grade levels. And so under MAP, you had 74% at grade level using 3, 4, and 5 being considered proficient, while 34% on grade level on the TCAP because we have the 4 levels. And I'm just wondering if it would be something that we need to look at going to 5 levels, because I think we need to have this identification, evaluation, elevation process in place, but it's going to not work successfully if we're not properly getting the correct kids. And I guess that's my main concern.
So level 3 is not proficient. So I need to be clear about that. It's a pass. It is a pass score, but level 4 is proficient and level 5 is advanced. So my concern was we were only asking children just to get beyond level 1, which was way far away from proficient. And that's the reason I asked the legislature, just bump it up to make sure that it's at 3 or higher, because we had to ensure that we were grabbing as many kids as we could that needed that kind of help. And the beauty of that, the assessments that are administered 3 times a year, is that you can get those kids early on. And so by the time, if you start in kindergarten and in 1st grade and in 2nd grade, those are the kids that you really focus on. So my goal was that by the time 3rd grade came around, there shouldn't even be an issue around 3rd grade. We should have captured those kids a long time ago and made sure that they were getting the interventions and the help that they needed. So that's the distinction that I would make to that.
Quick follow-up.
One follow-up. But in your opinion, the 5 levels has worked really well?
It's worked very well for us.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. That's all.
Thank you. I'll go to Representative Hicks. See any? Don't see him. Okay, how about Representative Slater?
Thank you so much, Dr. Wright. And I'd like to thank my colleague for bringing up the point that I think the media is who labeled this the 3rd grade retention law. I'd submit to you that this is a 3rd grade intervention law. And I do think that we need to go earlier than the 3rd grade. If you don't mind, could you, Dr. Wright, go back to the slide few before that illustrates retention rates, however, because I would like to focus on that. I've received a lot of emails, especially from concerned parents and sometimes from teachers and other educators. And the rationale, though they may not say this as succinctly, is that, well, we're only proficient in Tennessee at about in the low 30 percentile range. And so therefore, oh man, look how many kids are going to be retained. It's got to be astronomical. But it looks to me like that the highest rate of retention when it comes to 3rd grade was 9.6% in Mississippi. And then you've also compared Mississippi's law to our 3rd grade intervention bill. And so can you kind of perhaps estimate what we might be seeing when it comes to retention rates in the 3rd grade? Is it going to be in the double digits, do you suspect? Or do you think that it's going to be similar to what Mississippi saw?
Well, with respect, sir, I've not looked at your data, so I would not want to comment on that until I'd had a chance to really look and evaluate your data. I mean, I know our data inside and out, but I don't know Tennessee, so I really don't want to speculate without looking at the data.
Yeah.
And that's certainly fair. And I don't know that we're comparing exactly apples to apples, but perhaps we could take a look at what maybe some anticipation is from the Department of Education. But it doesn't seem to me that you experienced this astronomical number of retentions. Is that a true statement?
That is a true statement. And part of what our law put in place was that, and the one thing I will say to you that I said to teachers and leaders across the state, children that are being retained don't need the same thing one more time. So 3rd grade's got to look different. It's got to look different in terms of intervention. It's got to look different in terms of the minutes of the reading block. It's got to look different in terms of how much time that they are spending in direct instruction. So we put several things in place in our law that even if you were retained, 3rd grade would have to look different for them because they needed stronger and more in-depth intervention than they had had the year before.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, Dr. Wright.
Thank you. And members, I'm trying to hit those who haven't spoken yet before I move back, kind of breaking my own rule here. But Representative Sapicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You you and the previous speakers have unpacked a lot of stuff here. So if you'll just bear with me for a second. You talked about pre-K in Mississippi.
Yes, sir.
Was that state-funded universal pre-K?
Universal pre-K, no. But where the state funding came in 2013, they started appropriating with just $3 million. And so we said, okay, we'll take the $3 million. By the time I left, because of the results that we were getting out of our early childhood programs, I had come in asking for an additional 16 million on top of the 10 million that we were currently receiving. And they said, not only will we give you the 16 million, we'll give you an additional 20 million to expand pre-K even more. So our early learning programs were working. In fact, we were one of only 5 states in the nation that the National Institute of Early Education Research was recognizing as meeting all 10 quality indicators. So pre-K, I cannot say enough about in terms of its importance, and the longitudinal data around that is marked. So, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
You follow up.
So what percentage now of those pre-K students is Mississippi touching? And do you have a prerequisite of you start with economically disadvantaged and work from there? Or how do you distribute? Because I'm sure that money doesn't touch all pre-K students.
No, it does not. And let me get that data point for you. I don't have that off the top of my head and I want to be accurate. But what I can tell you is that we used our data from our statewide assessments to place our pre-K classes in the areas of the state that we knew did not have sufficient access to quality pre-K, and which our data was also saying to us were some of the lowest performing districts across our state, because we felt we needed to be the foundation for helping those districts continue to grow and get better. So it was not based on socioeconomic status at all. It was really based on our data, and as much money as the legislature provided, that was then how we translated it into sending it out to RFPs, if you will, to the districts, and then they applied because they had to have some skin in the game as well in terms of some of their funding. But that has been one of our proudest moments, is that we have continued to expand pre-K across the state, and it has really proven to produce positive results for children.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll come back to me after other members have a chance, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. And we'll cut this off in 5 minutes so we can complete our program. One person has spoken. Representative Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here, Dr. Wright. I'm just trying to keep up with your presentation and take copious notes throughout it. And one thing that stood out is that Mississippi had a 3-year runaway time before implementing this law. And that what I also saw was that you started small.
Hang on 1 second. No, they didn't have a 3-year before they started implementing the law. The law went into effect in 2013. So actually we started it in 14-15. So we had a runway. The legislature ended in spring of 13. And then we started in the 14-15 school year with its implementation. The 3-year span was when I raised the bar.
Okay.
So the bar had originally been in 2013 at level 1. And then in 2016, I asked that they raise the bar, but give them until 2019 to start implementing the bar.
Representative Jones.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Sorry.
Chair. Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Wright. And so you started small. You started with a small sample group and then kind of worked your way up from there.
No, this was statewide. So this was a statewide implementation. So statewide teachers were trained. Statewide we implemented, the literacy coaches. Statewide we developed the resources that we knew that teachers and parents were needing. So this was a statewide implementation. It was not start small and get bigger.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm. Now, pre-K is different. Pre-K is very different because that we did start small. When you're only given $3 million, and no offense, but when you're only given $3 million, it's just only so far you can move those $3 million.
Okay. My other question was, so looking at the data you gave, 9.6% of students were retained in 3rd grade, when more than 50% of the students weren't proficient according to the test. Can you explain that type of discrepancy and that?
So you're going to have good cause exemption, which allows those promotions. And I don't have that data on one of my slides. I can certainly get that to the chairman if you want, because we publish that data every year. We publish the numbers of children that are promoted based on good cause exemption and exactly which good cause exemption was used to promote that child. So the one thing I can tell you, we've been very transparent on our data. So if you go to our website or look at the superintendent's annual report, you'll find very transparent data on our implementation process. But that is something that we've done every single year.
Got it.
Mhm.
One last one.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. My final question is, did you require students to attend summer school with 90% attendance and adequate growth and tutoring to be promoted, or what were the?
No, sir, we did not. The requirement was if you did not pass on the spring assessment, we gave the results back to the schools very quickly, probably within about 5 to 10 days. And then they knew immediately which students were not passing. And they then had that time then to provide additional remediation. Then another test was administered at the end of May. Those children that did not pass at that time, then the schools then offered summer programming, or if the school was still going on, after school programming, but that was up to the local districts as to what they did. And then the final test was administered in August. So they had and through the beginning of August then to pass that test.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Members, I'm going to make sure we're okay. Yeah, we got a couple minutes. I'll recognize those who have spoke before. Representative Hurt. You already been answered. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a question in regards to your interaction with parents through this process. What was required for parents when their children were facing retention?
There really wasn't a requirement. There was a huge encouragement. I think that's one of the reasons that we developed those family success guides. That's the reason we set up the website. You know, we had lots of resources that we were developing for parent use. In our early childhood program, as somebody had asked that question, we introduced them to an app that parents could put on their phones. So if they were at the library, or they're driving in the car, or they were at the grocery store, and you could literally go onto the app, put in the child's age, and something developmentally appropriate would come up for that parent to engage with children. So we tried to put in their hands the resources that they need to engage with their children, but there was not a parent requirement.
Quick follow-up.
Follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What about those parents that couldn't read themselves?
Well, I was just leaning over to Commissioner when this topic came up. That's something that the districts have to be very aware of. And you can't hold it against a parent that can't read. You've got to figure out a way to help the child. And so that to me was the most important thing, is that if you're reaching out to parents, and these principals know who these parents are, the superintendents know who these parents are that struggle to read. And we've got to figure out a way, and that's what we tried to do, was to try to figure out a way. There was an after-school programming, because a lot of our schools run after-school programming or summer programming, but you can't depend on a parent who can't read, and it's not their fault. We've got to figure out ways that we have to take control over what we've got control over. And I said that once to a superintendent. To be very honest with you, this superintendent said to me, "How do you expect us to teach all these poor kids?" Because Mississippi has the largest amount of poverty in the nation. And a stat that I did not give you when I looked at the NAEP scores, one of the stats that I was most proud of is that our children in poverty, whether they were white, black, or Hispanic, outperformed all of their counterparts nationally. That's huge for a child in poverty. So we have to take control over what we've got control over. And we've got control over the school day, for sure. And then districts have control over before school, after school, and summer programming. And so it really has to be a community effort.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much. Do you have one follow-up question, Reverend? Yes, sir.
In Mississippi with that one, the one that shows the kindergarten through 8th grade about
Oh,
the
got
retaining?
it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. That one there. Did you see any adverse effects of catching them in kindergarten and getting them retained in kindergarten? Were there any adverse effects in 3rd grade with that? Or were those students be able to get on grade level and stay on grade level as they move through the system?
I don't know that we looked at, to be honest with you, adverse impact as much as we looked at who needed help. I mean, I think that's the way that we approached it. We approached it, as I said, prevention and intervention. So we wanted to get in as early and as soon as we possibly could to provide the interventions that these children needed. So I don't know that we looked at it as adverse impact as much as who still needs help. And I think with our accountability model starting in 3rd grade and really looking at that bottom 25%, principals knew that was coming. So they knew that when 3rd grade hit and that accountability model, took place, that that was really a lot of points that they could earn in our accountability model by bringing those children out of that bottom 25%. So I think knowing that was coming in 3rd grade, that's why I'm saying this is really a pre-K through grade 3 issue, because the earlier you can intervene, the research has clearly shown the earlier you can intervene, the more you can help children.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Wright. Appreciate you being here. I would say one thing is 20 years ago, we used to say in Tennessee, thank goodness for Mississippi, because we were 49, y'all were 50. We can no longer do that due to your intervention. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to being with you next weekend in DC on the NAEP board. Thank you so very much.
Thanks so much, Chairman.
We're now going to bring up our next panel, which is Mr. Clint Satterfield, Ms. Jeannie Barker, Dr. Amy Doran, Superintendent Gary Lilly, and Dr. Sally Parrish. If there's enough room, if y'all could just occupy the 5 or 6 seats here. And while they're coming up, let me recognize, I haven't done so, we have in the audience my mentor, Chairman Harry Brooks. Harry, would you raise your hand, stand up back there? He was the chairman of this committee for many years. Metro. Representative Jones, would you like to recognize?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I see 7 of our Metro Nashville School Board members. I just want to make sure to thank you all for being here. Metro School Board member Aaron O'Hara Block, Christian Buggs, Cheryl Mays, my constituent, Emily Masters, Rachel Ann Elrod, Abigail Tyler, and Dr. Berthina Naba McKinney. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you. Okay, committee, what we've invited this group of speakers is to give us a district perspective on the impact of implementation. And so we will address each one of these. I'm going to start with Superintendent Clint Satterfield of Trousdale County. Right there you are, right there.
Right here.
You're recognized, sir. Just identify yourself and make sure the mic's on.
I'm Clint Satterfield. I'm the superintendent in Trousdale County Schools. Thank you for having me here today. This is very important to me. I have a grandson who is a 3rd grader. I have a school board member who has a 3rd grade student as well. So this discussion permeates our discussions a great deal as well. First of all, I'd like to also commend the legislators for the efforts that you are showing to address 3rd grade reading. I think it's one of the most commendable things that you could be doing across the state of Tennessee. We have worked for I'd like to commend our teachers. They have had an unyielding resolve at addressing learning loss from the results of the pandemic. You see across the state where teachers have gone into early retirement and changed professions. And I think our teachers has hung in there and worked with our students a great deal to overcome learning loss. We've coined new terms such as learning acceleration and within curriculum scaffolding. We have been working with our summer camps for the last 2 years. We appreciate the funding in those spaces. We've done a really good job getting certified teachers in every one of those summer classrooms. We have not leaned on community partners or educational assistants, and we think the students who are the furthest behind need the best teachers that they can get. We have put in the 90% attendance rule in those last 2 years, and that has made a difference for the commitment from the families that are making, and we've seen a great deal of progress with our students from those summer learning camps. Presently in Trousdale, we're doing the work. We've worked on our summer learning camps as I've just described. We started our communication with parents over 2 years ago when this law first came into effect, communicating with our 2nd graders last year and even our lower grade parents as well. All of our elementary teachers have been trained in the state Reading 360 Science of Reading course. It was a 1-week course. I think it was 2. And they did one summer and one the other, but all our teachers have completed that training. We've adopted high quality curriculum and materials, and we've done that since 2011. We did that a long time ago. We're also a early literacy implementation mentor district. We're a Best for All district where we spend over 60% of our ESSER 3 funds on instructional practices with students. We've implemented the state-approved universal screener. We've run that twice this year. We've also implemented formative benchmark assessments, and we've run those twice this year. And we're getting ready to run our 3rd one. So we have a lot of data both from a reading screener data and from a benchmark screener data, as well as we're looking at where our third graders are that I'll talk more about in a minute. We've had ongoing communications with our parents. In November, when we got our first reading screener back, we met with all our third grade parents. We had 4 nights that we met with our third grade parents. The disappointing thing was that we only had about 30% of our families that came over a 4-night period. But those that came said the information was really well received, which will get me to another point in a minute. We're presently recruiting our summer camp teachers. We asked them 2 years ago, what would it take to get our teachers out of the pool during the summer? And we are paying our teachers $43 an hour. And we also have an attendance bonus as well. But again, we think that's really, really important because the students are the furthest behind, need the best teachers that they can have to help them catch up from learning loss. We are presently going through our summer camp registration. It's an online registration. And we have we're asking all of our third grade parents to register at this time because we don't know how the data is going to come out at the end of the year. But right now we've got about 40% of our parents that's registered for summer learning camp. We're looking at our data right now. And right now, if we look at our benchmark data, and if it's predictive, then we've got about 57 of our students would be non-proficient at this point in time. We have about 44% of our students would be proficient. Now, one of the things that we haven't talked a great deal is about the appeals process and how they can use the Universal Reader Screener. The commissioner talked about that a little bit, and if they're in the 40th percentile, then they can get an appeal. There's about 29% of our non-proficient students that would get an appeal if that counted right now, which puts us at counting the appeal where we are in Trousdale County right now, that 60% of our students would show proficiency and 40% of those students would not, which means they would qualify or have to consider these interventions that we were talking about.
Okay, and I'm going to have to cut you off in about 15 seconds, and we can come back with questions, but
Okay.
just so we can stay on time.
The only thing, Chairman White, that I really wanted to say is this. I have 2 fears or 2 concerns. One, and it's true that some of our parents will not take advantages of the resources that you've set in place, the summer learning camps and the tutoring, and they will choose to take retention. And that is sad. That's an unintended consequence of what you intend. The second thing is some of our parents will do everything that we ask them to do. They will go to summer learning camps. They will go to all core tutoring, and they still will not show substantial growth. And are we really going to fail those students? Because I think we're going to lose confidence in people. I think we're going to lose sustainability over time when parents do everything that's asked of them and we still retain students. And thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Jeannie Barker, Lenore City Schools.
Thank you, Chairman White and committee members. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to allow me to express how important your support is for this initiative and for this law. I also want to just take a personal privilege and say thank you to Representative Fritz, who came and spent an entire day with us in our district, learning about the good things that are going on in Lenore City. So thank you. I, too, share the vision of making sure that we do everything possible to ensure that our students are able to read proficiently. And we've heard a couple of different definitions of what proficient means. It means a little something different in Mississippi than it does in Tennessee. And thank you, Representative Haston, for asking those questions, because I think that's critical also to some things I'm going to talk about. I'm Dr. Jeannie Barker. I am the superintendent in Lenore City Schools and have been that for 11 years. However, I have been a Tennessee teacher for 40 years. I started off being a high school English teacher. I've been a middle grades reading teacher, a technology coordinator, a grant writer, an elementary school principal, and a director of curriculum and instruction in a district in Middle Tennessee. So I've been in East Tennessee and Middle Tennessee. And I pursued my doctorate in educational leadership. I want to just share that with you because during my career, reading has been critical to everything that I've been a part of. My goal has been to increase student achievement. But my role here today is I want to give you my perspective on the implementation of this law that has been passed. We've got to make sure that the implementation strategy ensures success for students. I believe that we must start with strong processes. And I want to define what I think as think big, start small, which is maybe not necessarily what you heard from Mississippi just a moment ago, but it is having a process where we can get our processes down clearly with the fewer number of students and then grow those successful processes to a larger group of students. So over time. So I'd like to look at that with you. I have success with this because with one of the initiatives, the latest initiative that we have in Lenoir City Schools was the high dosage, low ratio tutoring, which Tennessee has a version of that called TN All-Core. We started our process back in the spring of 2021. We had a group of students that we identified at the high school level that missed out on geometry because of the COVID closure of schools. And so we pulled those students in. We had a group of 21, a small group, and we sat with them individually and with a small group of 3 to tutor them to see if they could actually grow their skills and do better on the ACT retake test. 19 of those 21 students did. So we felt like we had achieved something that we could commit to, and that is high dosage, low ratio tutoring. So over the next 2 years, we took advantage of the opportunities that you all helped provide with the funding for All-Core tutoring, and we now have 656 students daily in small core tutoring for both reading and math in grades 1 through 5. We are seeing some wonderful data indicating that those students are growing in their reading and their math skills. So again, thank you for that. We have received national recognition from 3 different areas. Just as recently as this week, had an interview with Education Week, which is a national paper about the good work that's going on in Lenoir City in that initiative. So as we work hard to implement what we need to do to increase student reading proficiency, we are hindered by a couple of things in the legislation, and that's what I want to talk to you about. It's the timeline. I'm sure that you've seen the timeline set forth by the Tennessee Department of Education, and I shared that with someone who was going to put that electronically in your materials. That is a very aggressive timeline. We don't get our data back for students knowing who technically falls into these categories of below proficient or approaching proficient until after school is out. And then there's a timeline for a retest, and then there's a timeline for an appeal. By the time we get all of that back, we are well into the summer before we can actually do the work that's needed. I've also provided an electronic version of what our Lenoir City Schools timeline looks like. And you can see that in your electronic materials as well too. And that shows that we go right up until school starting in August. So it is very important that you understand that that is a constraint that I think needs to be addressed. In Lenoir City Schools, we struggle to get qualified teachers to teach our students, especially during the summer. We have 35% of our students that speak another language other than English as their first language. Think about that just a moment. And these are students that have been in the country more than 2 years, but it takes 5 to 7 years for a student to learn to read in a second language and pass a test.
About 15 seconds, I'm sorry.
Oh dear. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So our data shows that if we start this first year and focus on those students that are performing below proficient, we can put some quality people in front of them. We can have some quality processes to make a difference with them. My concern is I want us to have that success. I want to make sure that we can create capacity that will show sustainability over time, and that we can then create that success for a larger number of students as we move forward. So I know that when we show success, then the naysayers and the critics are marginalized. And we've all gotten what we want, and that is for more students to read proficiently by the time they leave the third grade and beyond.
Thank you so very, very much. Dr. Amy Doran, I got to know Dr. Doran years ago. I was Upper East Tennessee, and we visited your school at the time when you were there, and just totally impressed with what y'all were doing at school. So, Dr. Doran, you're recognized. Mike.
There we go. Okay. Thank you, Chairman White, and thank you, representatives, for having me. I am currently working with Ballad Health as their corporate director for early care and education. But prior to that, I spent 35 years as an educator, most recently with Kingsport City Schools as the early childhood director. And I bring a unique perspective, I feel like, because I've taught everything from pre-K to third grade and been a principal in that age range. And I've been a literacy coach through fifth grade. My last time in the classroom prior to becoming an administrator, incidentally, was as a third grade teacher in 2011. So I remember that well. One of my main memories of that time is the day that my 24 third graders stepped into the classroom and how shocked I was at the varied levels among them. There were so many different levels, and many of them, I won't say many, but several of them were not ready to be third graders. And they certainly were not ready to learn third grade content. This was very concerning to me because I had been a kindergarten teacher for many years, and I knew the importance of readiness. I had children in kindergarten who came with varying experiences as well. You know, children who were read to every single day, who went to high quality early childhood programs and had every opportunity, and they skipped into the classroom excited to learn. I had children whose very first learning opportunity was the day they stepped foot into kindergarten. They were not emotionally or academically ready. And I saw that in that same fear in some of the third graders. So I'm not saying that every child who isn't ready in kindergarten can't make it to third grade, but what I am saying is there needs to be something that intervenes to change the trajectory along the way. We know research shows us that high quality teachers in kindergarten, first and second truly can make a difference. So if you can ensure that can happen, that's great, but it does not always happen. So to echo Nancy Dishner, it does begin at birth. And that's where I'm suggesting we need to really place an emphasis. I know everyone knows that children's brains develop 90% to capacity by age 5. So why would we not put an impact to make an impact in those early years, birth to 5? Because that's where we want our children to learn to be problem solvers and critical thinkers, so that when they get to the third grade, they'll be ready to handle it. And I've been in pre-K and kindergarten a long time, and I have seen many, many success stories. Not enough time today to tell you about them. But I can tell you that our Tennessee Department of Ed does understand this. They have put out the Tennessee Early Learning Developmental Standards. And if you aren't familiar with those, I suggest you go to the Department of Ed website and check them out. They're quite impressive. They are the precursors to the K-12 standards, and they begin at birth. We have standards for learning at birth in the state, and they start with the approaches to learning, teaching children how to learn. And then by age 4, they're really into early literacy, early numeracy, science, everything else that happens in kindergarten. Any child that goes to any of our high quality childcare programs in the state of Tennessee has the benefit of learning with these standards. So that's why I'm suggesting that if we truly want to impact third grade, we need to take a look at putting more time and effort into strengthening our early childhood programs in this state. Thank you.
Thank you so very, very much. Appreciate that. Mr. Lilly, Collierville Schools go over to West Tennessee now, and the director of schools in Collierville.
Good afternoon. For the sake of adhering to the time limit and for clarity of thought, I have prepared a statement. My name is Gary Lilly. I am currently serving my 4th year as Director of Schools in beautiful Collierville, Tennessee, which is in West Tennessee. Prior to that, I served in the same capacity for 10 years in Northeast Tennessee. I actually began my career as a reading teacher, so like you, I am passionate about teaching students to read. I appreciate the opportunity to share the perspective from my district. Before I do so, I do want to say thank you for the increased funding that you have allocated to support reading instruction and remediation of learning loss. The professional development the department has made available in explicit foundational reading skills is excellent. I have taken the course myself and even passed. Having said that, I do believe the current law, while well-intentioned, needs some changes. Like most districts, we use multiple assessments to gauge the progress of students. We administer both the Tennessee Universal Screener in grades K through 2 and benchmark assessment in second grade, as well as progress monitoring in tiers 2, 3, and special education. Please note that these assessments are all specific to reading, while the ELA TCAP test assesses a range of other standards also. Although optional, we do administer a standardized assessment in second grade. Based on the results of that, we targeted 248 students, or around 39% of our class this year, for intervention, which might be tier 2, tier 3, or all core tutoring. As of our last benchmark test, we still have 124, or almost 19% of the grade at risk of retention, even after backing out the exceptions. Of course, these numbers are a byproduct of our very rigorous standards in Tennessee. You may remember the 2007 National Chamber of Commerce report that gave Tennessee an F in truth in advertising because our standards were so low that the majority of our students were considered proficient. Well, the pendulum has swung to the other side. Each time we get a new set of standards, the cut scores are elevated. The National Assessment of Educational Progress is administered in 4th and 8th grades. NAEP also compares the rigor of state proficiency standards. In 4th grade reading, Tennessee has the highest cut score in the nation, which is set at the same level of rigor as the cut score to be proficient on the NAEP. Interestingly, in 8th grade, Tennessee's cut score is actually above the cut score for proficiency on the NAEP, which likely speaks to why it appears proficiency rates fall from 4th to 8th grade. Please understand, I am not advocating to decrease the rigor of our standards. I am proud that our state is now leading the nation in high expectations for our students. What I am saying is that the TCAP test should not be viewed as the definitive authority to target students for retention. Before making the difficult decision to retain a student, we employ a tool called Light's Retention Scale, which is based on more than 300 studies about the impact and effectiveness of retention. Just some of the factors to consider include the student's intellectual skill, number of schools attended, age, motivation, attendance, and emotional disorders. I can provide copies of the scale should you be interested in seeing it. Some of you received a resolution passed by my own Board of Education in which they quote the State Board of Education's promotion and retention policy, which says when we are considering retention, we must use a variety of factors at a minimum to include the student's ability to perform at the expectations of the current grade level standards, the results of local assessments, screening, and monitoring tools, state assessments as applicable, the overall achievement of the student's likelihood of success with more difficult material if promoted to the next grade, the student's attendance record, and the student's social and emotional maturity. In conclusion, I respectfully ask that you allow districts to use multiple data points when making the monumental decision to retain a student, which can have serious long-term negative consequences. At the bare minimum, like the presentation we heard about in Mississippi, the performance categories of the ELA TCAP test need to be rethought and calibrated to target only those students who are most likely to benefit from retention, because the current system significantly over-identifies the number of students who need such a dramatic and possibly traumatic approach. Additionally, the appeals process should consider the recommendation of classroom teachers. Finally, if the department is going to approve appeals, when students have scored 40% or higher on the latest benchmark test, please let us approve it on the front end without having to ask parents to jump through hoops. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director Lilly. I now want to go to Dr. Sally Parrish for our last 5 minutes. She was here last week, Memphis University School, and they have an 86% reading proficiency in our community, which is very impressive. And so you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman White. Members, thank you for having me back. For those of y'all I haven't met, I oversee a pre-K through 12 training school compendium at the University of Memphis. And, I had prepared comments, Chairman White, but you asked a question when we first sat down, and I feel very compelled by it. You asked, what are you doing to support children in our state? And I think I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you about an example where we're getting it right. And so I have to give full credit to Dr. Rebecca Scott and Stacey Adams for their 20 years of work in this area at Campus School. They've taught thousands of children how to read, including my own. And thanks to their comprehensive literacy plan, our students at Campus School are seeing great success. So as Chairman White shared, some of our data, our students are 85.4% proficient in grades 3 through 5, and we credit this in large part to a comprehensive literacy plan, which includes the foundational literacy work happening in our K-2 classroom. So I'll spend a bulk of my time talking to you about those practices today. And they are very aligned with many of the strategies you've heard from both Dr. Wright and Commissioner Schwinn. So in using our universal screener benchmark data, our August to January student growth across K-3 literacy, and for all of our members, you have all of this electronically if you'd like to refer to it at any point. And one of the pieces you can see in that data is our kindergarten gains from the first quarter of assessment from 38% proficient to our most recent January data to 86% proficient. And we see those gains across all of our grade ranges at Campus School through that universal screening data. We really credit our comprehensive literacy plan in those gains as it helps us to support highly effective teaching and student support practices for all students at Campus School. That comprehensive literacy plan speaks to the key areas of literacy that we have identified through research, much of which you've heard today, both on a national scale and in the local data we collect at the University of Memphis, which demonstrates the specific learning needs of our community. From that, we've formulated a comprehensive literacy plan that is based on the following paradigms. And the first one is critical, and I hope every person in the state of Tennessee is committed to this, but it is based on a culture of grand expectations for our children. We believe that every child in our school has the opportunity to be successful and that it is all of our jobs to ensure their success, and we take that seriously in the work that we do. The second is a shared understanding of why literacy is important and a collective approach to pursuing that work. Third, it's hiring and training teachers in the science of reading, which you've heard many people speak to today. And fourth, it's using evidence-based practices in our classroom environments and in our instruction. Specific to our highly effective teaching model at Campus School, all of our teachers are trained in the science of curriculum planning and integration. They're given an environment of managed autonomy in which there are non-negotiable elements of a child's education that we expect to see in all of our classrooms at Campus School, and we empower our teachers to provide those. Those include delivering grade level content through strong, rigorous instruction and deep engagement strategies, and again, a belief that every child can be successful. In addition to that strong culture of instruction, there's a strong culture of professional development. It's embedded within our school culture to build capacity around teacher understanding of curriculum, standards, assessment, the science of reading, and how to teach foundational literacy skills. Our teachers earn 80 to 100 hours of professional development each week, much of it rooted in that science of reading, including a weekly professional development led by our own faculty on site. All of our teachers are also Orton Gillingham trained, which roots back to that science of reading and helps them to quickly identify reading deficits encountered by students so they know how to manage those in the moment. Additionally, everything at Campus School is systematic, it's decided collectively, and it's based on student data. Every student at our school completes a learning styles inventory, and our teachers use that to modify instruction to meet the unique needs of our students. That data is mentioned on a daily basis. Students or teachers meet daily to review student data and identify interventions to support student success. And every student in our school receives intervention. So you can see in the documentation I've provided how we do that through our school schedule, but every student receives intervention, not just those students flagged as being potential risks for retention across our school community.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. And I really appreciate what y'all are doing at Memphis University School. Members, I'm going to jump back in and we're going to wrap this up with bringing Commissioner Swin back up. And if you have any questions at that time, we have to be out of here by 3:30. Panel, thank you all so much for taking your time driving in from out of town. This committee, the reason we're having this today is we are trying, moving forward, make sure we do the right thing across our state. The most important thing is that our children learn to read, and we shouldn't have to keep talking when they get 8 years old. I love what you said about K1 and 2. That's where we got to get it right. So thank you all so very much for that. Commissioner Swin, would you come back up? And while commissioners come back up, Chairman Haston, would you like to advise the committee on where we are with the legislation in your subcommittee on, and so that we know those plans going forward in K through 12 subcommittee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe it's March 7th is the calendar. We have currently 15 bills on our, for lack of a better term, third grade retention bills calendar. And so we will be working up until that time, looking at working with some of the sponsors. Some of the bills do have some redundancies, and just work with the sponsors and see if we can get some of them folded into one or two bill ideas going forward. But we'll be seeing that on March 7th.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Commissioner Swin, you're recognized now to kind of close us up and follow up and respond to some things you heard, and we may have time for a question or two.
Sure, and I will make sure to leave time for questions. I know it's more important you get your questions answered than I have any closing comments, but I think the most important thing that we've spoken about today are students. And we have 1 million of them in the state of Tennessee. We have anywhere from 72,000 to 75,000 in every single grade level. And a minimum expectation that we need to be able to say to every parent in the state is that we are giving our students the best possible education and the resources necessary to be reading on grade level by third grade. That's what I want for my daughters and eventually baby Jack when he's in school in just a couple of years. And I will reiterate that our schools, our partners that you heard from, and people in the community are doing a tremendous job and really making, I think, one of the strongest, if not the strongest effort in the country to ensure that we significantly accelerate reading proficiency in this state. We have two significant pieces of legislation that were passed 2 years ago. There's a lot of work to implement, and we've seen as a state, especially through COVID, that we have done that and know how to do that well. You all passed summer school, mandatory summer school. Districts got that off the ground. I do not know how. Amazing work in months. We had a literacy bill that has been passed. It is the most comprehensive literacy bill in the country. Lots of states are replicating it, and we are seeing the benefits of that with our children every single day in schools. And so what I would say is at the end of the day, regardless of what we are specifically talking about in terms of any specific piece of legislation, it has to be rooted in what is best for the students in the state of Tennessee, what is going to progress and accelerate their achievement as quickly as possible, and how we continue to do that, whether or not we are a partner, an educator, a principal, working at the department, a parent, a community organization, but that we are rowing in the same direction, and it is 100% about students 100% of the time. But I'm happy to answer any questions about literacy or anything else that y'all have.
Representative Boso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Swin, my question pertains to implementation. You heard Dr. Barker express some concerns about the timeline and about whether, even if this were a perfect piece of legislation, whether there's time to implement it properly. Could you respond to those concerns?
Sure. So what I will acknowledge is that over the kind of 4 to 5 years before I started in 2019, our standardized assessment was challenged. And I will frame it that way. Where we have gotten to with our current vendor is a very tight timeline. It is a tight timeline, I want to be clear. But from a timeline perspective, parents will get their first home literacy report in mid-October, their second in January of that school year. So parents should be receiving notification that their child may be at risk for needing additional supports 2 times before we even get into testing season. So those reports should be coming home. In March, we have summer programming prioritized signups for students who have been identified as not or being at risk of not being on grade level. May 19th through 26th is when the initial TCAP data results will be available. This year, because we can do a lot of different things, because we've improved the assessment process, raw scores and what we call raw score to scale score conversion tables will be available May 19th through 26th. What that essentially means is when your child takes a test or a student takes the test, contractually, the results are due back within 10 business days. We provide a table, and this again is new because we've improved the process. That table will help to convert that raw score into a scale score to determine whether or not the child is going to be at exceeds, meets, approaching, or below. And then May 30th through June 2nd is when parent notifications are available. The retest opens on May 30th. And then the parent appeal process also opens on May 30th. So again, a type timeline. We're actually going to accelerate the appeals process. So parents will be able to appeal significantly earlier in the month of May. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for laying all this out. Question, and I'll put in a 2-part question. I guess as I look at this great group of speakers, I didn't see representatives from our largest 4 to 5 LEAs. So my question would be, why weren't they asked? I guess is the first thing, and then secondly, if they were asked, do you think they would have responded? Because of this million students that you speak of, I'd probably say half of them probably come from the top 4 to 6 LEAs. So, systems and areas. So, would they have answered the charge or the challenge differently than the speakers that appeared before us today?
So I can't speak to the invitation list. As you know, I will defer to the chairman for that. In terms of the proportion of students who might be eligible, you are correct that our largest 2 districts in particular, but certainly the largest 4, are going to have the largest number of students who might be eligible for any kind of promotion pathways. I think what we are seeing is that when you look at a lot of the exemptions that are in place, and I know there was a question that came up that compares our law to the Mississippi law. And so one of the things that I really want to highlight is that under our law, there are additional pathways to promotion. So there is the pathway where you can participate in summer school with 90% attendance. To be clear, like I said, the flexibility that the department is offering related to making up any missed days later in the year. There's also the conversation about adequate growth or significant growth that is different in our law. How we are defining that is really about improvement. So if you show some improvement between the 3rd grade TCAP and the end of summer program, you are able to move forward. So I think when I couldn't speak for the 4 largest, I would never want to speak on behalf of their leadership and superintendents, but I do think that they are looking at larger groups of students in terms of end size. And again, it is incredibly important that all of our students, regardless of where they live, have the opportunity to get additional supports to be reading on grade level by 3rd grade.
Follow up.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up.
Yes, sir.
I just really encourage you to engage them. I think we got a lot of great information today. I don't think it would be too tall of an order to maybe call those 4 or 5 superintendents of those LEAs just to bounce off these things. They may be in lockstep with what our presenters presented today, and that's great information as well. But if there are some differences as we tweak and tool this law that I support. Be clear, I support and voted for this piece of legislation in 21. So I just really want to get it right out the gate as best we can. So thank you for considering that request.
Yes,
Re-
sir. And just to clarify, I don't mean to say that we have not spoken to the four largest. I'm just saying I don't want to speak for them at this hearing. We actually do, our team meets with what we call 8 regional centers every month. I actually was able to come to what we call the Mid-Cumberland one last, which includes, of course, one of our bigs and frankly, a lot of our kind of the next 4 to 5, and was able to talk about this at length. And so we do meet with them regularly. I think have heard the concerns, continue to work with districts within the boundaries of what is written in law to allow for flexibilities while still saying this is what the law says and this is what we are going to implement.
Thank you very much. We got 2 minutes, Representative Fritz, before we head to gavel out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Swin, thank you for your time today. Thank
sir.
you for your willingness to help with our town hall coming up this Saturday where we're going to have this same topic. Thank you to your team members that are going to drive South River to do that. And
Yes,
thank
sir.
you to all the folks that come in today. This is tremendously helpful hearing from you. I personally appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, members. What we tried to accomplish today is bring you up to speed on where we are as a state. As you can tell, there's a lot of moving parts of this. And as we continue to move forward with early childhood literacy, we can't focus upon the hard part and the challenges. We got to focus on how do we get K1 and 2 right so that we're no longer talking about holding an 8-year-old back in school. If we get that right, then we won't have this conversation. So having said that, we got a motion adjourned without objection. And thank y'all, everyone. Thank y'all, Dr. Wright and Dr. Burke, everyone coming up from out of state. Thank you. We're adjourned.